I'm Larry Meiller, and I have been on Wisconsin Public Radio since 1967, and that means 59 years.
I'm Norman Gilliland. I've been on Wisconsin Public Radio for 42 years as of the very end of 1983.
Go ahead, Norman.
I started on the night of December 27th, 1983, and one of the very first things I did was to get a parking ticket because I misunderstood what I'd been told about the lot right down in front of Vilas. So I kind of felt at home right away. And I was interviewing classical music at that point in what was a temporary studio right across the hall from the other temporary studio that we'll be working in shortly. And one of the first things I did was to mispronounce the name of a local expert, but you know, it takes a little while to get into all those pronunciations. But that's essentially what I was doing, classical music at night and live show each Sunday afternoon from the Chazen Museum of Art.
I took a class in broadcasting in my senior year at UW, and I took a course from Maury White in broadcasting. And Maury had a half-hour farm show on WPR and was leaving for the summer to teach a class in the summer, and he didn't have anyone to do his radio show. So about 2/3 of the way through the class, he asked me if I'd be interested in going on for a master's degree, and then I could be his assistant and I could be hosting the show while he was away. So I didn't have a job prospect at the moment yet. So I said, yeah, you know, that sounds pretty good. So I started on the master's degree, and then I would host this half-hour farm show, which is right at noon. And then he came back, and then about halfway through the master's, he gets a promotion, and then the Department of Ag Journalism at the time asked me, they were looking for someone for the show, and they didn't, and to be a professor, and they didn't have anybody. So they asked me if I would stay on another year. By that time, I was getting better at what I was doing. And they said, why don't you get your PhD and we'll hire you back? I said, that'd be great, but I didn't have enough money. And they said, well, there's a fellowship. And so I applied and I got it. I kept doing the radio show because I felt guilty about, with a fellowship, you're not supposed to do any work. But I still taught a class and hosted the show right straight through till I finished my PhD, and then the department hired me back, and then I was paid to teach and research and host the radio show. So that's how I got started. It was a lot different when I started. We had interview shows, but they were in-depth interviews on a typical news topic, so we did those kinds of programs. We had music. And all of this, by the way, is in the same programming. So you'd have news in the morning, you know, the farm shows at noon. You might have classical music in the afternoon. And then you'd have a lecture where we would go and record university professors. Not we, I didn't do it, but somebody else did. And we'd do whole courses on the air.
Well, in terms of the staff, it was different too, because much smaller staff, everybody knew everybody. You knew pretty much what they did, and people would even play cards during their lunch hour in the lounge, which was bigger back then. There's some been office encroachment on it in previous or recent years, and so kind of a different working environment in terms of people, and there was no such thing as a Zoom meeting, so if you had a meeting, my gosh, it was 3D.
Yeah.
You could actually touch the person.
Well, yeah, and when I started, we were in Old Radio Hall, which is a Quonset hut, kind of, across from what is now the Helen C. White Library, and so it was a big deal when we moved here to this building, and Carl Schmidt was one of the main planners of it. We have this very large buck studio. The reason we have it is because he wanted to do live plays and live productions. And so he created this studio, which was At the time there was, I think the CBS studio in New York City was a little bit larger than this one. We had the second largest in the country.
And did produce radio plays.
And did, absolutely. And
For
you were
national
part of a
distribution. Well,
lot
that
of
too,
them
later on, yeah.
later on. So, yeah.
I would say also that the people who worked here, at least from my standpoint, even from Larry's too, were somewhat different because they were a generation that had grown up during the Depression, during World War II. A lot of them were World War II vets. Carl was, and Ken Ost was another one. And it was a different vibe. I'm not saying better or worse either way, but it was just a different sense that you got, especially as one of the younger people working with those.
And Carl and Ken were, revered.
Yeah.
They were just, in fact, I went to Carl when I first started. I wasn't doing very great. And I said to Carl, I could use some help with my on-air. And he said, you're the first person who ever asked me that at this station. So he said, I'll have Ken Ost listen and talk to you. And Ken Ost listened, sat down with me, we talked things over, and it just made a world of difference. But he was amazing on the air. And he did do sports.
Oh, yeah.
Play-by-play
Did a
of
jazz
football
show.
games.
Yeah. Did
basketball.
He also did The Friendly Giant for TV.
Yes,
Ken
he
Ost
did.
Yeah, with Bob Hummey, which I watched even when I was still living in Florida. We can tell you about cutting tape. Yeah, we all have our nightmare
we could
stories
do it.
about that. But my favorite one, if that's the word to use, was I was producing something. I think it was with the Firesign Theater. I did a retrospective of them 50 years in, back in the 90s. It involved a lot of tape, and somebody had used the word planets. And okay, what you did with tape, as you may or may not know, is to edit the tape, you had to literally, with a razor blade, slice out what you didn't want and then splice it in with splicing tape, and you were good to go. However, in the case of the word planets, I lost the letter S somewhere on my office floor with all this other dead, discarded tape, and I'm looking for this little tiny thing.
Yeah, because it'd only be that. The tape would go across the head, the record and playback head, at 7.5 inches per second. So just the S would be really, really small.
And then the first thing, if you were lucky enough to think you'd found it, you splice it in there and realize either that's not it or it was in backwards and you'd have to like flip it around.
Yeah.
To this day, I think I did get the word planets, but I remember another instance or two where like the first word of a sentence was gone. You had to think, now does that sound right if he just says, found it when I was looking for it instead of I found it when I was looking for it? And the answer usually was yes.
I believe it, and I'm going to go with it regardless. Yeah, so reel-to-reel tape was what we used for our interviews. The interviews I did at the beginning were 6-7 minute interviews, and then I'd cut and splice those up. And you had a splicing bar that was made of aluminum, so it would not magnetize and erase anything that was on the tape accidentally. And a China marking pencil, and 3M made a special tape for splicing.
This light blue stuff.
And it was pretty strong, but you could easily peel it off.
Too easily.
Yeah, you had to be a little careful. I was pretty careful about always keeping the latest edit on my knee, so that if I screwed it up, I could go back to that, plug it back in, make the correction, and then.
And the trick was, often as not, it's this spliced tape that you're actually broadcasting.
Yeah.
So it was particularly, what shall we say, important that the splice hold.
And that'd be correct and tight.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got to click.
Yeah, now broadcasting one of these things could get exciting too, because we used to broadcast an early morning show called Prelude that I was on for several years, and it had a book review in it that was done by a guy named Irving Kreutz, so they were like about, 10 minutes long, something like that. The reel-to-reel machines were behind the operator in there, which was me in the morning, And I backed up my chair one time, they're on wheels, backed up my chair to do something else and hit the on-air book review into fast forward on the air. Now you couldn't hear anything, but it gave me a kind of a problem because I really wasn't paying that much attention to where it was in the tape. And so Irving Kreutz is saying something like, well, on my better days, I think that, and okay, that's all I knew. So, and we're on the air, you know, we're talking about dead air here until I get this thing sorted out. So I hit it in rewind and stop and pushed play, and he wound up saying, well, I really think that, and he went right on. It was beautifully, perfect timing, and you get one of those in your lifetime. You know,
Yeah,
those my one right there.
Those are rare indeed when something like that happens, for sure.
I felt quite proud of myself on one occasion when I was working very early morning, 5:30 to 9, doing classical music on LPs, and we had carts. And on this particular morning, it was the day after I had moved, so like 6 truckloads and I think 26 carloads, and I'm up at 19 minutes past 4 in the morning to get to work and do this thing. So understandably, I was, you know, not in the best shape. And I started one of these carts. It was like must have been a 30 because it was 19 seconds of tape on it. And I start the cart and I fell asleep. And I start to dream, and I woke up before it was over. 19 seconds for the whole process.
I have had a variety of furry and feathered friends. So I think the largest animal I had was a llama. And I was interviewing a gal about her llama farm, but she brought one with her up on the freight elevator. And she brings the llama in, and the llama's standing like this far away from me. And I said, well, is it going to be okay in here? And she said, okay, don't make a lot of sudden movements because they spit. They won't bite you, but they'll spit. So anyway, that llama sat there for 45 minutes, didn't hardly move a muscle, and she trotted it back out the freight elevator, and away they went. And I've had penguin, I've had snakes, I've had jumping worms, I've had cats and dogs, dogs especially, training dogs, seeing eye dogs, dogs for folks who have special needs. I'd have them on the show. They'd bring the dog, obviously. And chickens, a few chickens, and what am I missing? Anyway, a broad range, and birds, parrot, and a songbird who sang through the whole time.
Parrot okay with the language? You didn't have to hit the
Oh, the parrot
dump?
the parrot squawked once, but it didn't say anything else.
Not a very good interview then. For the parrot.
I received the Media Hall of Fame award from the Milwaukee Press Club. And there were like a half a dozen people who were honored. And they had very large slides up that were up behind us as each one of us talked and everything. And I'm looking at all the other ones who were like news people and stuff. So interviewing President Obama and interviewing the mayor and things like that. And then mine was me with a penguin, which kind of fit, to be perfectly honest, because those are the kinds of things I did.
Well, they're fun. Challenge. I don't think I've had any feather or furry friends for interviews, but doing productions, I have had some experiences. Yeah. And I had, for example, I was doing actually a kind of wordless drama one time where I had a husband and wife tied to a tree, and they were supposed to be deceased and all this. And for the occasion, I needed some bugs, so I went out and bought a couple of special cockroaches and some other stuff. And the woman was wearing a very nice old-fashioned dress with a white bodice. And while we're getting ready, one of the roaches like goes down here, but she's wired to the tree and she can't get it out. So I say, well, excuse me, Kim, and I'm kind of like doing my best, you know, to do justice to everybody. So that's kind of the spot you get into with some of these creature features. I needed some horses for a Beowulf production I was doing. I happened to be in the Hoofer Riding Club at the time, so I knew there'd be some people down there, and sure enough, there were like 6 or 8 like teenage girls riding around in the parking lot. I said, I'm gonna stand right here, you guys just ride around me. You got the most beautiful sound
perfect.
out of that. I was playing some of it back for Carl Schmidt at his house. There's a scene where somebody's drawing a sword and it goes like this, and the dog just jumped out of his chair at the sound of that thing. So you never know how they're gonna react.
The penguin smelled to high heaven, but it was from the Violet Zoo. So we were talking about some zoo things that they brought along. I forget the penguin's name now, but the penguin sat there really nice the whole time. But I was kind of glad to be done with that interview because she really was smelly.
Not a problem with most guests.
No, not a problem with most guests. I grew up on a farm, and we had a garden. And I'd spend time in the garden with my mother when I was a kid, you know, a little kid. So I learned to spend, I learned quite a bit about gardening from her, but I certainly have gotten an education over the years. I'm not a master gardener. I think I could do pretty well on the test if I took it. And mostly that's because of the Garden Talk show. Over time, and it wasn't a very long time, I realized that some of the most popular shows we had were when I'd have a gardening expert on. I was talking with Jack about that, Jack Mitchell about that, and I said, I think we ought to just have a day set aside for gardening. I don't know what to call it. Why don't we just call it, try to think of some sexy names, and why don't we just call it what it is, Garden Talk? Sounded like a good idea. So that's how Garden Talk got going, because it was so, and it was, I might have a garden show on Monday, and then maybe there's another one on a Thursday or Wednesday. And so the Friday Garden Talk has worked really, I think, very well over the years. And so I can think of the hundreds and hundreds of garden shows I've done. I feel like I've learned an awful lot.
Well, let me see. The first classical music I remember was actually listening to Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf when I was 4 or 5 years old, sitting on the floor eating Ritz crackers and playing Basil Rathbone narrating on 78 RPM records, which were dangerous because one little nick in that and it's literally a buzzsaw going around the turntable really fast, take your little 4-year-old finger right off in no time. Fortunately, I survived that. But then after that, we did some drawing in kindergarten or something with our eyes closed to Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker. And I don't know what the idea was, because you wound up coloring all over the desktop, before you're through. But I mean, it must have had some impact, as I remember. And then I started taking piano lessons when I was 7, and I started practicing when I was 14. And got up to kind of probably, I would say, my maximum potential right about then, which is where I've been ever since. And it's probably to her credit that my piano teacher left, or let's say fled the country. But the thing is, you can learn a lot about, it's kind of the analogy is you learn more about a stretch of highway driving it or walking it. And for me, it was walking. I had to fight for every note, and so I got to know some of those pieces really well that way. I didn't necessarily know what they were supposed to sound like when they were put all together, but note for note, I got very acquainted with them. And then by the time I was in college, one of my best friends was actually a professor who had been through, had been a singer at the Vienna Opera, but he was teaching Chaucer and logic when I knew him anyway. And I would go over to his house, and he would play records of these, made by these friends, not just opera so much, but it's mostly like pianists that he had known in Vienna at his time there. And he would tell me these colorful stories about the performers and a little bit about the performance itself, and just while away the afternoon that way very pleasantly. Then when I was at Duke University in grad school, working on a doctorate in English. There were some guys who decided to build a radio station in a classroom, and they did it, and they financed it with zero money. Nobody got paid anything, and I was doing so. I did classical music for one semester. I did some kind of news features for another. I did what we would call oldies, but were then newies, like 2 to 5 in the morning or some god-awful time. It was a great time to learn radio and learn more about classical music, and then it was just jump to WRUF in Gainesville, Florida, which was a commercial station owned by a university, which is very unusual, and then jumped to the NPR station like 3 days after I was finished at the one, also University of Florida, and then jumped up here. So, but that was all classical music, and you know, it's possible I could have just done something else. Probably not garden talk, because I kind of can tell a tomato from a radish, but by the way I would grow them, they'd be about the same.
Yeah, when I started college, Oscar Meyer was the biggest company, private company in Madison. And I had friends' parents who worked there, and the wages were good. And I thought, you know, and I was interested in communications. I did many speaking contests and things of that nature. So I thought, you know, I could do my marketing degree and a animal science degree, and maybe I'll get a job at Oscar Meyer. So that was my original goal. So I was taking those courses, and then going back to taking this radio class, which I didn't need, and I just took it because, hey, it's a speaking class, and I was listened to a lot of radio, and I thought this would be fun because, you know, part of it was putting together a radio show and at the end of the term, and so I really did. I loved the course, and when I got on the air, it was nerve-wracking in the beginning, but with some help, I got better, and I got to like it a lot. After a couple of years, I think it was a couple of years in, I was really thinking, oh, this would be a great job to have. I had a half-hour show, then it was turned into a 60-minute show, which was sort of consumer and ag. Then it turned into a 60-minute, mostly consumer-oriented kinds of things. Then it became 90 minutes. Oh, somewhere at 60 minutes, it turned into a talk show. That was in 1978, call-in. And then it was 90 minutes. Now it's 2 hours. And we're not going any higher than 2 hours. Really, I loved working with the people here, always great. And I was teaching too, and for many years I taught a broadcast class. So I was able to, I had students come over here all the time and sitting in with me or doing other things here. Many of my students wound up working here as an intern and then on to other jobs in public radio or commercial radio for that matter. As a result, so the teaching side of it sort of wedded me into this whole thing and made it even more satisfying.
I would say, well, two things. One was I was fascinated by radio when I was a kid. Now I was, like a lot of people in my generation, I would watch TV, even the test pattern before the show,
Yeah.
the thing signed on. I was that glued to the TV. However, radio, I kind of discovered it in a couple of ways. One was when I was about 13, my parents gave me a shortwave radio for Christmas, and that was just fascinating because you could listen to these places all around the world. Radio Moscow was particularly strong. I was listening to them, and my father said, "You better let the FBI know what you're up to here." So I wrote to the FBI, told them I'm just listening, you know. And I got a letter from J. Edgar Hoover, you know. So that was kind of cool. That was one step in it. Another step, though, was at night you could listen to these AM stations all over the country, at least briefly.
From Texas?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in Florida, I was listening to WNO in New Orleans. I was listening to WLS in Chicago a lot, WABC in New York, and Fort Wayne, Indiana was another one. The fascinating, mostly clear channel stations, so
Yeah.
there wasn't any interference.
And at night, the stations that might have interfered
Would sign off.
would sign off, and so the clear channel AMs.
Yeah, stayed on.
I can remember listening to it. There was a Texas station that I used to listen to, a music station.
The other thing about Florida in particular, though, was when you had a hurricane warning or the weather was just getting very unstable, there's one AM station, WDVH, that got to stay on after sunset because of this unusual circumstance. And my sister, one of my sisters, liked to go and take donuts to the DJ because to know that he would be stuck there for who knows how long. And so you're actually in the radio station, you know, and you're seeing this probably kind of scruffy guy. Wow, this is what's behind all this, you know, the kind of the magic of radio. And I would say by the time I got to the commercial station, WRUF, I was just so fascinated by all the things you could do with radio, whether it was, you know, spinning discs or doing plays or just so many things you could do, and behind the scenes it was so fascinating. So I was hooked by then.
You could create images, you know. I mean, we can do a lot with video now, obviously, and we can create anything we want with video. But when we were getting started, you could visualize better through radio.
Or not. And let me tell you a Carl Schmitt story. You're more familiar with this than I am because you were around it when this was happening. Carl also had a job doing newscasts on local WIBA, I think.
IBA, yeah.
And so I guess he wasn't that much of an early riser, and it was an early morning newscast. So Carl would jump in the car last minute, speed down Van Nuys, get out to WIBA, do the newscast in his pajamas, and then go back home. And I'm told that there were even like police scanners that you could tune into and say, man in pajamas speeding down Van Nuys, you know. So you can imagine it both ways. You can imagine he was there in a tuxedo and not imagine the truth, you know. People have no idea either what the person really looks like or what the heck's going on behind the scenes when they're there, you know, because sometimes it's chaos and the idea is just to present this smooth decorum.
Over the years, I've had many experiences like that where people meet me. Like I used to do a week at the Wisconsin State Fair, and so people would come. I had an audience in that, and people would come up to me afterwards, and they would say things like, "Oh, I thought you were younger," or "Oh, I thought you were skinnier," and then they go, "Oh, sorry."
Oh, that's very common, all too common.
Very, very common. Of course, now with, you know, we're so visual now. Yeah. Our faces are plastered
on T-shirts.
even a T-shirt. So it's not quite that way anymore. Although still, and I'm sure this happens to you. I was at the car wash, for example. I think I may have told you the story, and I'm paying, and I'm talking to the person who's taking my money, and there's a gal behind me, and she says, "Boy, does anybody ever tell you sound just like Larry Meiller?" And I am Larry Meiller. Get out of town.
Yeah, right.
And I had a waitress just a couple of weeks ago, and she starts to take my order, and she says, "Oh, I know that voice."
If you're lucky, they don't just stare at you and you wonder why.
No, and people will blurt things out.
Yeah.
I was with a friend, and we were having a beer and a burger at a place, and it was sort of a horseshoe kind of bar sort of situation. And so she's saying, "You're thinking about retiring, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, it's probably getting to be about time." And there's a couple across the way, and at some point they said, "Don't retire."
Yeah, you get that.
So your voice and my laugh, if they hear me laugh, is, "Oh, I know that laugh anywhere."
Yeah, Yeah, it happens a lot. Back in the day, I used to have a show that had voice tracks on it at night, and freed me up to get around a bit during the night. So I was at some kind of a plant store or something in line, and my show is on. And so I back announce, something, and the woman in front of me says, "What did he say?" And I said, "Oh, he said that was Tchaikovsky's Symphony Number 5, blah blah." I don't think she got it at all. But it was a lot of fun.
Oh, and she didn't. Oh, you didn't realize it was you.
No,
oh,
she must have
gosh.
thought I just knew a lot about music. I don't know.
Oh, but you don't sound a whole lot different on the air versus off the air, I don't think.
I'm not much different. No,
No.
I mean, that's one thing I've never.
Well,
really
we're
been
both
able
that.
to.
I
You're,
think
same for you, of course. Yeah.
we are who we are.
That's exactly. Yeah, the mic really shouldn't make any difference.
I tried that early. I mean, like in the first week.
You put on an English accent or what?
No, I tried to sound like when I read the news.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to sound, a little more like Walter Cronkite than.
Well, that's a good one to emulate.
Yeah, a good one to emulate if you could do it, but I couldn't do it. And I just, at some point, I thought, no, you got your voice, you got your own personality. Just be yourself.
That's what I tell people every day. I tell you, because people come in, whether they're doing, a member drive or they're doing, a newscast or something.
Yeah.
But please just be yourself.
Yeah.
Use your real voice.
I'm sure Carl and Ken probably told me that back in those,
Yeah, good advice.
do what you do, be
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll just really miss sitting in that studio. For me, I've got this audience that wants to talk. We have really good guests, people who know what they're talking about. We have an audience that is not afraid to call and ask questions or give answers sometimes if the guest or I don't know the answer. And that being there in the moment and producing a show. And so many, the shows some shows are, all right, if you were going to grade my show, some days you'd probably grade it higher than you would others. But overall, just the fact that I can sit down in that studio, turn on that mic and talk to that guest and then get our listeners involved and get that kind of community going, that I will miss a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty similar for me. I miss being in there and just communicating with those people out there. And I do have this kind of strange, I don't know if you want to call it a gestalt or what, sense of the collective of the audience that I'm speaking to, possibly based on all the people I've ever met out there who were in the audience. So that and definitely some of the interviews. In fact, my concern is that when I'm out there, I'll just go into interview mode when I'm talking to people anyway, talk to the server. So how long have you worked here? And, what do you like most about all that stuff? It's just really tempting to go into that kind of communication.
Yeah, I do it. You probably do it too.
Oh, I'm sure I do. It's to the point where people kind of give me the slightly startled look after a while. But it's an awful lot of fun.
It is great fun. And we're going to both miss it.
Yes. And maybe even miss each other unless he wants to go nematode hunting sometime.
Well, we meet in the hallway almost every morning.
Now, yeah, more often than ever, yeah.
What's on your agenda now? You're going to be done at the end of June.
June 19th.
What's the thing you're looking most forward to?
Well, there are about three things, and there's one thing that I've been doing for years, but I just have never had quite enough time. It's been drawn way out because I write books.
Yeah.
And, some of them have been well received. Some they've been on chapter a day.
Yeah.
No influence of mine. It was all the choice of the reader. I've got these ideas, so I've got a couple of books that are, one of them's half done and another one's more than half and all that. So I can actually spend a morning like a real writer, doing that till lunchtime and then go out and talk to people. So I'm looking forward to that. And then also, of course, I have certain family members who say, why are you getting home so late? Or, what's taking so long now? Or it's third time I told you it's time for dinner kind of thing, you know. So there'll be more time for that and for the younger generations before they grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking about writing, I've told many people over the years that I was going to write a book, a mystery, called The Seven-Story Shaft.
Has a wonderful ambiguity to it.
And well, we
Talk about
have
Boris
that,
Frank.
We have that Boris Frank memorial elevator shaft that was never, and now is going to become an elevator. They're actually putting it together. But I always thought that it'd be really cool to write a mystery where a dead body is found at the bottom of that shaft. And the seven-story shaft, you know, there can be all kinds of meanings associated with. So far, I have the title.
It's a good start.
Oh,
Some authors never get that far, but
I've got, in terms of just retirement for me, I'm on some boards, and so that's going to keep me busy. And one in particular, I'm on a subcommittee for an addition to an early learning center. It's a few $1 million. I'm on the planning committee for that. And I've got 3 daughters in 3 different states, going around to visit them. And I got a hole-in-one last November 7th on the golf course, so I'm going to keep playing golf.
that's the way golf works, isn't it? One good shot. And you're
One
back.
good shot. There you go. Where'd the time go?
Yeah.
Man, oh man.